These are your stories of God. Past experiences, explanations, ideas. And they're superseding the old stories. The old stories that we were offered, religious stories that we accepted for a while, then rejected. The old stories is religion. The old stories that are way outdated that religion rejected and replaced were mythology. Those religions that have died, we now call mythology. Those are the dead stories. But the stories that are still alive with the story of God, current time, are still religions, which may one day turn into mythologies too when people stop believing them. And in the stories of God, the religion stories, God often takes the form of a character that we can conceptualize. You know? Old guy, white beard, you know, sitting the pearly gates and deciding who's good and who's bad after you die. And so there's a character, and then there's many stories of what's God's doing, what it's deciding, how long it took him to create the world. There's stories in those religions and dead religions of mythology that he's just and fair and loving. There's also versions of that character that you better follow the rules or you're going to go to hell and you're going to be punished forever in eternity. In this place called hell. Should grow up as little kids. Maybe I've talked to many people who are afraid. Their parents were just pounding that into them. Or that you're living, you know, what you've done is terrible and you're a bad person, and therefore the guilt and the shame. Which then is a motivator. You don't want to feel that, so you don't behave that way, and you become a better person by following the rules of the community and tribe. So it has a functional value in society for people getting along following the rules, with the price of guilt and shame, or fear of guilt and shame, or fear of suffering in all eternity. So a lot of these stories have community, societal conformity, rules, values. They're stories. And God's a character. God's an idea of generally a person. And I think from what you've each described, our sense is to just not buy that version of the story, those religious versions. And when you learn critical thinking, I know for me, the stories start conflicting. I go, this doesn't make sense, because I grew up Catholic and I was going to church every Sunday with my parents, and you know, and then I started to like, you know, you're asking the question, is this true? Is this how the world works? Does the story I have, the belief I'm being asked to take on, map to reality? Okay. Does it map? Is my worldview mapped to the world? That's kind of the belief system, right? Here's the worldview. Does my version, my story about the world or story about God map? And the one that I was being offered to have my internal world, God's an all-loving God. God is love. And oh, by the way, God is, if you don't follow the rules, you'll go to hell. And then there's kind of this eternity of suffering. And I'm like, well, okay, these two don't add up. It's not congruent. Huh? How do I believe in one when the other one's a contradiction? You want me to believe in both? And the hell of suffering for all eternity, you know, for some sins that happen in my little minuscule life, like that big, that maybe I could do for 60 years of really bad shit, suffer for all eternity, like giant punishment for the little trouble I could do in my life. But God is a just God. That didn't map. That's not coherent. The story I want to have on the inside with what the word just is. And oh, by the way, this place of eternal damnation, that is part of God's plan, you're going to suffer there for all eternity, is being run by Lucifer, Satan, pick your name, who's obviously doing the job of punishing you that God has prescribed you to receive, but he's in rebellion of God. So he's working for God, but he's in rebellion. You see, he's doing the job according to God's plan, but he's in rebellion and cast out against God. So that doesn't map. You know, if he was really rebelling, he'd be celebrating all this stuff we were doing against God. Like, oh yeah, you showed him, you're free. I celebrate you. Contradictions in the story. And so we can't build a coherent story. I couldn't build a coherent story. I reject the whole thing.